So what do wooden spoons, chiropractic care, and rugby have in common? Find out all this and more in this episode of the podcast.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hello, friends. Whether you're a first-time listener or you've listened to all 150 episodes to date, I just want to introduce you to our friend, Victor Manzo. In today's episode, we're going to start off having fun, talking about him growing up as an Italian American, and our cultures were so similar that it made me laugh repeatedly and brought up a ton of fond memories. So you're not only able to join us, but kind of get into the mindset of what it was like growing up in that culture within America and what we learned from it. Also, he's going to talk about on his journey. As you listen through the entire episode, there's gold nuggets that you can take and run with and apply to your life. In his personal life, he's going to show you how he left school for college and started learning and growing and seeing the difference between the institution of higher education and the love of learning. He's going to talk about all sorts of laws of the universe and how we can harness that power and apply it to our lives, and how he became not only a chiropractor, but he has a specialty of pediatric chiropractic care. And then now he's helping others, not only in the chiropractic sector, but he took the principles of starting a successful business, and now he's helping others in all sectors replicate that success. So this is a packed episode, tons of entertainment, tons of great content. Get your pens and paper ready, unless you're driving, and let's enjoy this episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, The Victor Manzo Story. Hey, Victor, how are you today, brother?
Oh, man, I'm doing absolutely amazing. Thanks for having me on, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And our audience, I just told them a little bit about you and your story and what they're in for today. But if you were to summarize just one of the things they're going to be able to walk away with when they listen to this episode, what's a main message you want to convey to our audience?
The power always has and always will exist within you and nowhere else.
Amen. Amen. And with that, let's get started. For our new listeners, the format of the show is we go past, present, and future through Victor's life, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So Victor, at this time, where are you from? What was your upbringing like? You know, parents in the home, siblings, chaos, blessed. What was your from birth on like?
So I'm originally from a suburb in Chicago known as Melrose Park. I'm assuming by your last name that you're probably Italian like myself.
No, Smith?
So I grew up in a small little Italian community, and, you know, it was very tight knit. Everybody knew everybody. A lot of people came from, migrated from Italy over. And that was one, like, very close, like Calabria and Napolitano. I'm Napolitano, or from people from Naples. And so that was kind of my upbringing, being an Italian Roman Catholic. I don't think maybe some Italian households are calm and relaxed, and that I didn't. I had the normal fiery mother, and my dad was very calm, laid back, and relaxed. He was a man of few words. Rarely got mad. I think maybe twice I've ever seen him mad in my entire life.
Wow, that's crazy, especially for any Italian American home.
Exactly, right? And so for me, one of the times I did that, and the other time someone else did it, got him mad, and I was just happened to be there. And it was it was interesting to see that type of patience, but I appreciate it because I learned from that, and I take on that characteristic. So, your standard Italian's a hothead and all these other things. And I remember in high school, they'd be like, talking to friends or girls or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, you're Italian, you're a hothead." And I was like, "Get to know me, you'll see." And then they're like, as they get to know me, like, "You're not, you're calm, you're collective, you're, so forth." But yeah, but my upbringing was I came into this world on the wrong foot, literally, no pun intended there. if you look at the top of your feet, if you're looking down at your feet, you'll see the tops of your feet. My feet, instead of being, these are the tops of my feet here, instead, if you're watching the video, they turned inward and were coming up. So it's almost like seeing the bottom of my feet. It's called club foot, and I had bilateral club foot. They had to put me in a cast on one foot. The other one, they were able to work through. And so that set the stage for a lot of not fun things. I mean, health was an issue, ear infections like crazy. And then at 4.5 years old, thank God for the might of one of my cousins I have 29 first cousins. And so one of them were babysitting me, and I happened to almost die. I had bacterial meningitis where for those who may not know, you get a real high fever very fast and you get seizures. Thankfully, at the time, I lived like a little over a block and a half away from a hospital. She literally just picked me up, didn't know what the heck was going on, and ran me into the emergency room. Doctor said if it was like another 10, 15, 20 minutes later, my brain would have probably, I don't think it would have fried based on what I know, but I would have had some permanent damage or not be here at all. So a little bit of a scary note there, but always having, the crazy Italian lifestyle with the big family, everything was family. So I had some friends, but it was mostly all family. That's kind of how I grew up.
And how many brothers and sisters? How many brothers and sisters?
I only have one sister. She's 4 years older than me, and she is, so she's deaf. She's the miracle baby in our family. And she taught me sign language before I was even speaking, talking, which was kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I seen when my nephew was born, it was seeing him at that age, and he would start to sign. He couldn't even talk right fully yet, and he was signing. And my mom's like, "That's how you were." I was like, "That's so cool," because I don't have a memory of that. But I was seeing it was very, very cool. So, but yeah, I only have a sister, but my dad comes from a family of 9. So, and there's a lot of family in there. So, but otherwise, I mean, it's big family. Always getting together, had dinner at grandma's house every Sunday, as much as sometimes I wanted to and sometimes I didn't. That's just kind of the upbringing I had growing up. And I having good food always. Mom cooked. I learned how to cook when I was 6 years old, or started to, at least I should say. I made my first gravy, or those who may not know, that's a tomato sauce, at 8 years old. Because my family comes from a blue collar, so they had to work a lot. My mom had a business in the house, and she did a fitness and fitness classes and so forth. My dad had a couple jobs, and sometimes I go help work with him. So he would always tell me he's going to show me what hard work's all about, so that I don't like it and don't do it. He wanted me to be the polar opposite of that, and I really respect him for that, because that's a steward. He was doing stuff, even though he didn't aspire to go further and grow in some ways. He was more focused on making sure I didn't follow in those footsteps. And so, yeah, I started to cook at an early age, and it's one of the passions I love to do to this day.
Yeah. And growing up in that kind of culture, even though you're American and you're proud to be American, having that Italian American background, there's a lot of camaraderie and loyalty and family values that are just missing in our generation today, at least in my opinion. I don't know if you feel the same way or not, but I was really, really thankful. I grew up outside of Boston, and I had not nearly as many cousins as you, but there's just a different sense of community and family, and just how the environment works. So like you said, your cousin, she saw you sick, she takes you to the doctor, and just everybody works together, right?
Totally. I mean, that's and that's something that you don't see as often in today's world. I won't say some of the families not as close as it used to. I mean, some things just happen, and life happens and whatnot. But it's one of those things where those values are very instilled in me. I mean, I remember my dad used to tell me, I only had one set of grandparents, because my dad's parents, my grandfather, he passed away 2-3 months before I was born, and my grandmother passed about almost a year after I was born, just shy of it. And so I didn't really have them. So he would always say, appreciate the grandparents you have, because he's like, I didn't have them growing up. And I was blessed to have great grandparents. And I had them until my great grandfather passed away when I was 14, and my great grandmother passed away when I was 18. And even with them, he would be like, embrace the time you have with them. And I was like, I don't know, what am I going to, I'm a young kid. So I'm like, what am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, go. So I remember one time he took me on a job there, and he was going to redo their carpet stairs and the landing. And my dad's he's a family guy. I seen it. He wouldn't charge them anything, not make money off them. He just did the work because he wanted to do it. And they would argue, they're like, no, we got to pay you. He goes, just feed my stomach then, fill my stomach up. That's it. Just fill my stomach up. And so she'll make a nice meal. But I really appreciated him because I remember, I'll never forget that day. I was 12 years old. Now, I don't speak a lot of Italian, but I understand it. And so my great grandfather was here talking to me about him and the war in Italy and all this stuff. And I remember after I walked away and I got home with my dad, and I said, just thanks for pushing me to do that. I got to learn a story about him that I never knew. I just never, he had a whole nother life to him and I didn't even know about. And it was just fascinating because I appreciate it, because 2 years later, he wasn't around. Or 3 years later, it was 15 when he passed. And it was one of those things where I appreciate that. And the same thing with my grandparents. I kept such a close relationship with them. I remember even after, when I got out of chiropractic school, we can let life get in the way, right? Here I am trying to be ambitious, start my own business and trying to figure all these things out. But due to my upbringing of that close knit, being an Italian family and family's everything, I still would go to my grandmother's house every Tuesday to go have lunch with them. I always made sure I had availability every Tuesday to go hang out with them. And my grandmother always made pasta vazul. She would always make a little salad. And I would just go for the salad, and I just go for, if she had some chicken or they had some sort of meat. And they're the standard Italians. They ate around 1 o'clock. That's dinner for them. And so I would always make sure I go hang out with them. I'd be there for an hour. I had to leave because at 2 I had to go get to the office. And it's just one of those things that I greatly appreciate. And I'm looking forward to instilling that with my own kids. I was sharing with you beforehand. I just have my daughter who's 11 weeks in a couple of days. And it's one of those things where I really look forward to instilling the importance of family, the importance of the family unit, and embracing those things that's, some people take for granted in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think that's a great first talking point. The enemy, saying there's one God and there's real evil in the world. And he wants to break us up and divide us and lose that kind of just order where it's God and your family. And our country's showing it, and all over the world, I think most of the countries are struggling. So kind of as our first talking point for our listeners who have all different types of backgrounds, some of them got to experience a big family and that kind of camaraderie and loyalty. But for the ones who haven't, and they're looking to raise their family or to put good kind of habits in their life, what are some of the habits you'd recommend to them?
So the kind of habits to instill in their life, or habits?
Yeah, like you said, like every Tuesday you go visit your grandma, and it didn't have to be exciting. Sometimes you didn't want to go, sometimes you did want to go, but you made it happen. It was something that you made a conscious effort to do, and then you benefited from it. What are some of the other things with that tight family upbringing you learned that you'd want to share with the audience?
Besides, the biggest thing is just always, you have to ignore some of the things that come up, because family, you can't choose them, right? And so you're not going to all get along in some way. And what that taught me, though, is to find common ways or commonalities that we can. What are the things that we can enjoy, right? Because you'll have cousin so-and-so, and it's just like, oh, this person's always like this. Here we go. And we learn to make it comedy in some ways, like, in a certain way. It's like in the Mexican culture, they'll give nicknames, and the nicknames are usually the polar opposite of what the name. So if someone's a little overweight, they call them flaco. And I don't know how that is now. This may not be accepted. So I'm just clarifying all this. This is when I was growing up. This is what I saw a lot of, because my best friend's a Mexican, and I grew up with his whole family because they were across the street. So I grew up with a very strong Mexican influence in me also. But I am Italian 100%. But long story short, like if a kid who's a little overweight, they don't, gordo means fat in Spanish, but they wouldn't call him fat. They call him flaco, which means skinny. It's just a nickname, right? So it just becomes that nickname. It's like the cute little thing that they do. Nothing offensive. It's just a joke. And that's just how you get your names. So we would do stuff like that, but in the sense of making it fun and light, and just, instead of, in the world we live in today, and you see it so much, and you were sharing this just recently, like, divisiveness, and how we can't even have conversations. If I mention one thing you don't like, there's a label on me, and that's the end of it, right? And that's why family structures won't survive. I mean, look what happened with COVID. COVID destroyed so many families, and you have to get past certain points. And I think when you have a family, especially a big family, there is a lot of opinions. That's one thing that probably annoyed the living crap out of me growing up. It wasn't fun. I'll be transparent about that. because everybody has an opinion and everybody wants to tell you your opinion, whether you ask for it or not. It's just the way it was growing up. But as I got older, I appreciated it. I didn't appreciate it sometimes I'd be like, oh, don't mention this to this one or this person, because then all of a sudden, they're going to go on this rant and it's going to be the end of it. But as I got older, I appreciated it because it taught me to just be more open-minded. I'm very open-minded with so many things. I'm rarely closed-minded. Maybe my wife might say I am in some ways, at least in my awareness. I know I'm very open-minded in a lot, but it allows you to be more flexible and have difficult conversations. And you'd be like, that's cool. I love your point of view. That's not my point of view, but that's your point of view. And that's great. But that's one of the things that, I would say one of the big things I learned from having such a big family and gathering, but discipline, camaraderie, going beyond, with just being there for people, like no matter what, like it's unconditional love. It's not like, oh, they act this way, so I don't like them. It's like, or I love them when they do this and I don't love them when they do that. It's no, I'm there for you no matter what happens, no matter what shows up. And that's something that I'm not going to say I had that all around, but within my inner little circle of family that I hung out with the most, that's how it was. Like, it didn't matter. They can say something, they can do something, didn't matter. I'm there for you. We're there, here to support no matter what shows up.
Yeah. And if I'm just from what you're saying and from what I've experienced in life, it's kind of like, like, okay, Uncle Joe, this is just how Uncle Joe is. It's not saying it's right, but you just know what to expect from Uncle Joe. And you guys can have seriously passionate, hot conversations, arguments even, but at the end of the day, you're family and you agree to disagree and you move on, right?
And we'll have fun with it. Or like or even like we had a lot of friends of the family that would come around, and people will know that's so-and-so, and you know how he's going to get, or let's say he's a strong liberal, this one's a strong Republican and can't stand, and you just go ride with it, and you get them all wound up in a fun way. We're all laughing, having a blast. Yeah, he's maybe mad, maybe I may get a little irritated at times, but at the end there's no judgment. Like you said, it's just, hey, love you, man, appreciate that. We had a good time, didn't we? Yeah, you're still a son of a gun. I appreciate you too, you know what I mean? But It's just having that time to just do that. The other thing my family is very known for is just having, and Italians are known for this, it's just having a good time, right? And not letting little things get to us. And that's like with holidays, I always used to look forward to it. Like, Christmas Eve, my mom, we had it at our house after a certain point, 50, 60 family members coming over, and it was just a blast. And we just have fun. We laugh and drink until 4 a.m. I have one of my great uncles drinking champagne. He'll count how many bottles he drinks throughout the night. And, it's just, we just have fun. That's what we cared about. And we had a blast. And I think that, again, letting go of those things and just appreciating the moment or appreciating the time we have too was something I really appreciated from my family and what I got from them.
That's awesome. What a great example and way to explain it. And yeah, if you're listening and you can't get in an argument or have a disagreement with somebody or talk about your viewpoint, there's something fundamentally wrong. Like, you got to go back and be able to openly talk and discuss through things. You don't have to agree, but you're always challenging each other and making each other think. And, when people stop thinking, that's when the problem happens. And that's where the media and the propaganda sets in. It controls your life. So being able to, whether it's with family or outside people, you got to be able to just be real, be you. And that is something that, talking to you and hearing your upbringing, Victor, it's refreshing. You know what I mean? It's enjoyable. So for your first, let's say 18 years, then between your birth and 18, you're finishing high school, moving on with life. Is there anything we missed in that time period that you're like, Dave, this is significant to my story and where I am today? Or do we just keep moving forward?
That's a great question. There's so much other stuff that I didn't share. There's my, the religion side upbringing. There's the emotional hardships that I went through, just because I was very emotional as a kid. Now they call that an empath, where I never understood. This is the weirdest thing. I couldn't understand how I can be feeling great. I'll walk into a dinner dance, and dinner dances are basically, you have dinner and then you dance afterwards. And it was usually with the club, some of the clubs, they call them clubs, but they were like the Club de Napolitan, the people, again, from Naples, the Club Calabrese. So those are people from Calabria, and they're just Italian clubs. And then they host a little fundraiser and you have dinner and all that. And what was weird for me is I walk in feeling great, and then I go past the table and I would all of a sudden be like not happy. And then I go another table and I feel angry. And then another table I feel, and I'm like, why is this happening to me? And I never understood that. My parents didn't understand that because they're like, why are you're so emotional? Just, whatever. And they didn't know how to handle it at the time. They weren't at the, the emotional intelligence wasn't at the level to where they can be like, let me sit and talk you through. Let's walk through this together. It was more like, you're feeling, my mom, like, you're feeling that way, go, go until figure that out, or go in your whatever until you can get that, figure these things out. And so that played a lot of role on me because that created a lot of, self-worth stuff. And especially like in high school, I went to an all boys high school, Catholic high school. And it was one of those things where I didn't enjoy high school. Yeah. Everyone says high school is sometimes the best years of my life. I sat there and was like, nope, I just couldn't wait to get through high school. It was just not fun for me. I had a low self-esteem. You wouldn't have seen it if you saw me, but deep down I did. And just from, again, from my upbringing and stuff with an Italian culture, and you had the Roman Catholic background, a lot of guilt and shame. And so I was always cautious.
Guilt and shame out of an Italian family? Come on. For everybody else in the world, that's total sarcasm if you didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, and you add the Catholicism into it, and it adds a whole nother layer. And oh man, my grandmother was the best. I used to go rounds with my grandmother. I was the one who I had such a good relationship with my grandmother. I can swear at her, but I can never swear at her at anger. So, and I've only did that one time in my life, and she knew the difference. And she looked at me and said, "What did you say?" And I said, "I am so sorry. No, I'll never do that again. I apologize." Oh my God. Now you may think my grandmother's a big woman. She wasn't. She was 4 foot. By the time when she passed, she was 4'6". But when she was in her prime height, she was 4'11". So not the tallest out of the tall. And I'm 6 foot 240. So, and it was one of those things where it's amazing when your grandmother that small can just turn with her tone. I'd be like, "Yep, sorry, yes, I will never let that happen again. I apologize."
That's a real thing, man. That's real.
It's one of those things like I don't know how to explain it. Like my grandfather, his background's a little interesting. He was very, he grew up, he was a little abusive with my, I wouldn't say a little, but one of the things about him that was great, and I appreciate the relationship I had with him as I got older, is I was one of the very few that he can talk to and he would get emotional. Here's a guy who is straight up Italian. I mean, just as Italian as they, with the anger, and it was the stress. I mean, and some people judged them, and I always was like, you know what? People don't do certain things on purpose. Once they realize why they do what they do and where it comes from, they're probably not going to do it anymore. He saw a dad who used to beat his own wife, and that was what sticks and stuff like that. So he, his storyline, just because it went down, some people say, well, that's still, he should have learned. I'm like, if you're going to be that way and, point fingers and do all this stuff and not understand where people are coming from, we can't make change. But one of the things that I really respect, one of the things that we got older, as firm of a guy as he was, he got emotional with me all the time. I was that one guy he can get emotional with. And my mom will always say, she's like, I don't know how he does that with you. She's like, but you're the person he'll talk to. I'm like, yeah, he'll literally tell me how he feels about people. I was the one he would open up with. And we had here's again, and for those who don't understand, an Italian male, if there's already a male complex that goes on in this country about we can't show emotions and this and that, you add an Italian mix on the top of that, it's even stronger about like you don't show emotions at all and this stuff. And for me to have that relationship with him was really an eye opener because it taught me, again, teaching me things that you don't judge from. How to, what my grandmother went through and still loved him all throughout his life till his passing day. That teaches you something, that leaves a mark. But I might be going off on a tangent here, but
no, man, this show is just us talking, and our listeners know that the longer they listen, the more gold nuggets they're getting along the way. And sometimes you're going to say something spontaneously and like, why did I say that? But it's really going to hit a listener. We're going to get emails and you're going to see how you help someone. So don't worry about it, man. But no, we'll probably get into that in your story, but it was probably that empath trait that's in you, the gift that God gave you, that somehow you were pulling it out of him and he didn't even realize, right?
Oh yeah. I was known for the guy who people would just open up to. Like I knew everybody's like secrets, but I would never talk about any of them. And you learn early. And my dad used to tell me, he goes, your mouth is always going to get you in trouble. Now he said a loud mouth. And eventually as I got a little older, I was kind of like, if I said something and then I share something or whatever that I heard or this and that, not sure, people, they confided in me. And then of course somebody comes back, oh, you were talking crap about me. I'm like, I wasn't talking crap about you. And I was like, I don't want this drama, because sometimes in an Italian family, families in general, but you add the Italian mix to it, it can be a little dramatic. And I'm being very sarcastic with that.
Yeah.
And so, and it was one of those things where I lost my train of thought with the sarcasm, or with the drama, and anywho, we'll carry on. I forgot where I was going.
No, you were saying how in an Italian home it can be very dramatic and a lot of intensity. And then you were talking about how people would confide in you, but you wouldn't share anything. But sometimes you'd be accused of something.
It was the empath trait. So then, but people would always come to me and share more of the opposite sex. Females would reach out to me, would confide and stuff, and like, you know how to listen. You just would listen to me. You get me. And I'd just be like, yep. But then again, growing up in the culture of Italian men and so forth, and growing up in that era, you guys didn't share their emotions. We were macho guys. We work out, we show off muscles and body. We, all these other things that we had, ego stuff that we did. And so it was hard for me to, I would connect easier with females than I would with males because of that trait.
Yeah. So then move forward with your life. And, I'm laughing. We're recording. I explained this briefly in the intro. We're doing a side-by-side recording. So sometimes if people are watching, they're seeing me laugh. It's because it's so easy to talk to you because backgrounds are similar. But I've got beat up twice in my life. Once by a 4'9" woman that was such a close family friend. I called her auntie my whole life. And it was for something I didn't even do. She thought I got kidnapped. And then when I showed up healthy, because my mom didn't tell her, my baseball practice location changed. So I had to walk. I came in her house late. She's like, oh, you're okay. And she hugged me, crying. And then in a split second, she snapped. And I got the worst beating of my life. And everybody was shocked and stood there and watched her. And then her 6'2" husband finally ripped her off me. I had like hair missing, scratches down my face. My shirt was ripped. But that's my Auntie Nancy, and I love her. And if you're listening, Auntie Nancy, thank you. Because even though I didn't do anything wrong, I probably deserved it for something else.
Right? I can totally relate with that kind of stuff. I mean, my mom hates when I say this all the time. I'm like, Ma, I counted 18 wooden spoons you broke over me. She's like, it's not nice when you say those kind of things. And I go, listen, I ain't judging you. I know what kind of kid I was. I probably deserved 99% of them. I mean, I was that type of kid. My dad had this wooden paddle in their basement. They had oak wrapped around all the walls and the post that held up the second floor. They had it wrapped in oak. And my dad had this wooden paddle that was there. And he would always say, this is an unbreakable wooden paddle. If you ever get in trouble, what I've suffered. My dad never raised a hand at me. My mom was always one that took care of that. And there was one day my mom grabbed it. I was aggravating the living crap out of her. And she goes to swing, and I had my elbow up, and she hit the perfect spot on my elbow where it broke the paddle. I could not wait for my dad to come home. I waited. I stayed up. My dad worked nights from 3 to 11. I waited for him to come home. And I look, as soon as he came home, he's like, what are you doing up? You're supposed to be sleeping. I said, I stayed up just to show you this paddle it is breakable. And the width of my dad, I go to bed. I wake up the next morning. The paddle's up there. It's duct taped. And I go, no, I thought I broke it. So anywho. So I can relate. I've been there. I like I said, I tell my mom all the time. She hates when I share this. I'm always like, Ma, I probably deserved, if anything, all of them. I know what kind of kid I was. And it wasn't I was like a bad kid. I just drive my mom nuts and she loses it. Everyone has a certain breaking point. And back then that was the kind of thing, the way it was.
Yeah. And Vic, you're listening to Victor's story. You're seeing me and him. We both, the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. The blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil. I personally believe if you're not spanking your child, it's abusive, right? You talk to them where you can, but there's a time where we need discipline. And both me and Victor, you're seeing two American Italian men who are so thankful we got beaten and know we deserved it. So don't spare the rod, ladies and gentlemen, use it. And what's funny is, again, if you're watching this, my mom, I think every Italian home had not just the wooden spoon they'd pull out when you did something stupid, but they always had that special paddle hanging on the wall as a constant threat, right? Can you think of one Italian home, Victor, that didn't have that?
there was always that one thing. There was always a paddle or something that people were like, oh yeah, when that comes out, I'm in trouble. Nope, I am not letting that happen. Or it was out in the open. Like this, the paddle was right out in the open in our basement. We lived in our basement. And so it was one of the, like, I think, what is it? Italians, most of the time, they live in their basement and they had the sweet, beautiful kitchen upstairs. My parents eventually got to that point where they got the upstairs remodeled. And then I was like, why are we still cooking in the basement when we have a brand new kitchen upstairs? And it wasn't until I came back home from Arizona State where I kind of enforced the using of that kitchen to make it happen.
Nice, man. So, all right. So now you're 18, you're growing up. Where do you go from there in your life?
Yeah, I decided to make a big move in life at 18. I just wanted to get away. I was tired. As much as I loved the family and the tight knit stuff and everything I grew up with, I had to see a different world. And so when it came to college, originally I wanted to go to computers. My dad was kind of enforcing. He's like, get into computers. That's where the money is. That's where the future is. And he wasn't wrong. That's where it was. But I didn't want to do it anywhere near home. And so I chose to go on a flight 3.5 hours away to Arizona State. And that's where I decided to go to school. They were the top like 2 or 4 in the United States in computer programming or computer science. And I was like, I'm going to go there. I was big into baseball. So I was like, I'm going to try on for the baseball team and see if I can get on and just enjoy life. And that's where my whole world shifted. What I thought was just because one of the things about growing up in such a big Italian family and that kind of culture and that community of being around a lot of Italians is you think you get fixated and conditioned that life's a certain way. And it's just, this is what it is. And you don't understand that there's a whole cycle, a whole wheel of other people, different cultures, different studies, different upbringings. And that opened up my whole world to have, friends from different ethnic backgrounds and get to learn their culture. Cause I was very intrigued. I was like, I want to learn more, people from India or, with a religion that's different. What's the religion like? I want to learn about the religion. What about, I have a friend who's a Buddhist. Wow. Buddhism. I want to learn about Buddhism. So it opened up my mind to so many more different things than just the Italian culture. Because growing up in an Italian Roman Catholic society background and so forth, is that you couldn't ask really a lot of questions about Catholicism. Like I would get judged, like you don't question. And I was like, I'm not questioning. It just doesn't make sense on some of the things that's being taught. Well, that's the devil's work. They want you to question. And I was always like, I never got a straight answer. And sometimes priests will get upset with me. And I was like, I just have questions. Just some things don't make sense to me. And it wasn't until that age, 18, 19, where I didn't have that, like, telling me I can't do something anymore. And I was like, at the point where I'm like, I can go study any religion I want. No one's going to tell me no. I'm out here in Arizona. I'm challenging myself to get uncomfortable, to be away. Cause I even have family members who are like, oh, he's moving away from his mom. He's a mama's boy. He's going to come back. He'll be back in 4 months max. And I hated that. But it also, what they didn't realize, again, I remember I said I grew up with a lot of opinions, but I learned to cultivate opinions, and the sweetest revenge is success. So I was like, okay, keep judging me. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. So yeah, I didn't make the baseball team, by the way. 150 guys, I came down to me and someone else. And they wanted, since I didn't have in high school, there was, a couple things came up. I let some stuff get in the way. I didn't really was that much of a star in the high school team. And so since I had no history, the coach was like, we're the number 2, number 3 baseball team in the United States. He goes, we don't take risks like that. I was like, come on, you saw how fast I run, you saw, but I hit, you see how strong my arm is. I'm like, give me a shot. I'll prove it to you. And they're like, we don't do that. I was like, dang it. But I ended up playing rugby though. I went to the rugby team. They had a club team. And I remember a guy on my floor in my dorm, he was from Chicago. And he was just like, hey, why don't you come and play rugby? You're a big guy. You seem like you're pretty fast. You look strong. He's like, you'll probably you ever play? I was like, I never played rugby, but I played tackle football, with my friends since I was like 10 years old. So I'm assuming it's something similar. He's like, come out for a practice. I said, you know what? I didn't get any conditioning in this week. I was like, or this, it was like Thursday. And I'm like, I didn't get any conditioning this week. I'll go work out with you guys. He's like, yeah, come for a workout then. All right, great. 2.5 hours later, I couldn't walk that well after the workout after that. And I loved it. It was a cool sport. And I didn't realize, I only knew rugby as, that's a hard sport, no pads, this and that. Yeah, it's like 90% mental. It blew my mind. And I was like, I can play. And the coach was like, you want to play? Well, we're going to, you can try to get onto the A team. I qualified for the B team because the guy ahead of me was playing for the last 3 years and he was a beast. And I had a lot of fun, but that's 18, 19 years old is where I had other things show up. So I was always in health and fitness. My mom, again, was a fitness instructor. So understanding what health was something that health to me, based on what I saw, was you eat right, you take supplements, and you work out. That's literally what I saw my mom do, and she was in great shape. When I go to her classes, sometimes we'd be at the local civic center, we play basketball and stuff, and then I just go up to meet my mom, and I see her class was ending. I would kind of see the same thing, similar. People are working out, they look in great shape, they look healthy, they're vibrant and healthy. So I was like, wow, that's health. Well, at 19, I started studying nutrition at 16 years old, just learning new things and wanted to get whatever I can as best as I can. And long story short, when I went to Arizona State, though, every month my health was declining. Every month I had new things showing up. So here I am. I'm working out 4 times a week. On top of that, I have 2 practices a week of rugby at 2.5 hours each, and I have games on the weekends. 1 game, sometimes 2. So
and
I'm
this was
working
pure
out.
enjoyment. There's no scholarship. It's just because you loved it.
Nope. Yeah, they didn't give us scholarships. We were fighting for them. I don't even know if they're still like that now, but it was just a club to go hang out, meet some guys, and then they were great. I had a blast. You talk about camaraderie. It gave me that a little bit of that Italian feel of that close knit kind of family, because that's what they took me in. And you got guys from South Africa, you got guys from Korea, you got guys from England and Scotland and all these different parts of the world, and we're all playing rugby together for one purpose, and just having each other's back no matter what. And so I was like, man, this reminds me of a home a little bit. So they gave me that feel while I was there. And, but yeah, health was just not getting better over time. And I started to get a little worried after the first year. I remember I told my mom, and I'm like, hey, I think I got some blood disorder. I got way too many things going on. It doesn't make sense. Like, I had acne on my back, never had acne before. Cold sores every 7 to 10 days, new ones coming up. Sensitivity to light, headaches. No matter how much I slept, I was tired, like exhausted. I was always bloated, and just so many other things going on where I was a little scared. And so long story short, mom was she got the appointment, but it took like a month. And then like 4 days before the appointment came up, she's like, why don't you go see Dr. Frank? Part of my story I didn't share was that I used to go see a chiropractor when I was a kid, and for bedwetting issues, and resolved around 11 and a half years old. Well, I was like, well, if he can get me in tomorrow or the day after, I'll go. And she's like, okay, calls, boom. He gets me in, he hasn't seen me in a while. Long story short, when I went back to get my whole report, he literally looks at me and he's like, okay, I can help you with all your symptoms. You'll be gone before you go back to school, which is about 2 months. He's like, you're gonna have to stop playing rugby. I was like, what do you mean stop playing rugby? You told me at 9 years old I couldn't play organized football, and now you're telling me I can't play rugby. I was like, what's going on here? And he's like, you have scoliosis. He goes, all that compounding, you are going to do some damage that you may never be able to repair back from on that spine. I said, all right, deal, fine, I'll stop playing rugby, which was not fun because, as I shared, that was my like Italian family away from home. And then all of a sudden he's like, but you're going to need chiropractic care for the rest of your life. I'm like, deal, it's my health. I don't care. Let's make it happen. What I didn't expect, now you understand, I've been working out like crazy, playing rugby. I'm eating not that bad for a college student. I wasn't eating bad per se compared to the average. I didn't drink much. I was most of the time the designated driver, which a lot of American, people I was hanging out with couldn't understand why I didn't choose to drink much. Like, you afraid to drink? I'm like, no, you probably haven't had drinking around you your whole entire life. I had my grandfather force some wine to me ever since I was like 9 years old. So I've been around the alcohol in my life. And I think that's a big difference in American culture, where parents may hide it and not do it. In my culture, or our culture, I mean, my grandfather every Sunday, he'd give me a little bit of wine, and I could choose if I wanted it or not. And then my dad sometimes with Sambuca would, the ice after it was all done, he'd be like, here, taste it. And what I didn't realize they were doing is giving me exposure to it so it's not restricted. That way I would have less of a desire to want it. To this day, I barely drink 5 drinks in a year. I just don't have I don't even drink homemade wine anymore. That's a whole nother story. But, it was one of those things where, so yeah, I'm doing all these things and I'm not in the greatest shape of my life. I go under chiropractic care for 2 months. My symptoms are all gone. I go back to Arizona State. I'm sitting there going, man, maybe I don't want to go into computers anymore. I think this chiropractic thing is really calling me out. I waited another month, and all of a sudden, about 3.5 months in, I get into the best shape of my life. I went down to 10% body fat. I had an 8-pack on my abs, and I'm just sitting there going, what the heck? I was a beast in the gym, putting more weight up than I ever had in my entire life. And I was like, how is this happening? Like, how's this immense growth? How am I getting the best shape ever now? I'm thinking about all the things I did, nothing changed except chiropractic. And that's when I was like, you know what, man, this is something I want to do. If there's so many more people who are way worse off than I am, that can use this and need to hear this. And so that moment, I remember I reached out and I said, Dad, I'm parents, I'm coming home. You guys, hope you guys are okay with that. I'm going to go to school at the University of Illinois in Chicago, and then I'm going to switch to business, and I'm going to become a chiropractor. And they were like, hey, they were supportive. My parents are always supportive, but they thought it was because of a girl that I was talking to at the time. Also, I was like, that might have been maybe an extra little push to go home, but I was like, I was going home regardless, because I was like, I got to pay this big bill for Arizona State, which was not cheap back then. It was like $24,000 a year, which that's nothing now compared to what they charge. And I was like,
Yeah, it's probably like 100,000 now, though.
Oh, it's crazy. And I was like, I'm going to pay that bill, and then I got to go to chiropractic school on top of that and pay that bill and on that, because again, we're blue collar, so we don't have nowhere the funds to cover any of these things. So I was like, no, I'm going to go home and try to save as much money as I can as I go through this process. And so I ended up going, after a year and a half, I ended up going back home and starting that whole journey.
Now, once you got home, I found that when you leave a tight-knit community like that, even though you're leaving to pursue God's will for your life and to better yourself, there's a lot of people who feel abandoned. And then when you come back, they're almost like, told you so, or bitter or angry, or, oh, you think you're better than us. When you came back, you're smiling if you're watching camera. But so I'm guessing, did you experience that as well when you came home?
Sadly, yeah. It was an eye opener for me. Like, here I am, a guy who had a gazillion friends and tight knit family, and all these things, and I come back and I'm not the Victor that you knew anymore. I'm not that fun, outgoing Victor. I was more serious about my life, because I got on a mission to, again, I always say my parents blessed me by showing me what I didn't want in life. They did that in many ways, financially, physical work. I have no problem doing physical work. It's actually my stress reliever. My wife knows when I get stressed out, I'm like, let me go chop wood for 4 hours straight. Let me go work on a project. I have to do physical labor because it's just instilled in me. But yeah, when I got back, it was a lot of hard stuff that hit. I started to see things that I didn't want. Like, I would say I judged. I would use that word. I'll be transparent with that, because I wanted to have people in my life who support me but have deeper relationships. And I'm not saying I didn't have those before, but I started to evaluate things. I was looking at things from a different lens. I've been gone for a year and a half. And it's like, when you come back, like, all those friends I had, they weren't really friends. They were all just, oh, Vic's back. Okay. It wasn't like, hey man, Vic's back. Let's hang out. Let's do this. Let's do that. It was just like, oh, he's here, whatever. I was like old news. Some of my cousins would call me an old man. I was a 40-year-old man. And I was just like, I don't get it. I'm trying to make a better part of my life. Like, what's the, here I am trying to, I don't want to be the stigma of what the conditioning of the family is. I understand things later on, but this is what I'm sharing here. But I just was like, I'm going to make something of myself. And if I have to sacrifice and lose people along the way, then that just means they weren't meant to be a part of the path. They were there at a certain point in my life, and they're not to be later. You hear the story all the time. People come in your life for a reason, or was it a season, or a lifetime? And something along those. But anyhow, it's going to be short term, mid-term, or long term, or your whole life. And I had to embrace that, and that taught me a lot. I mean, I had a lot of guilt already hitting me because I was being called selfish, because I was known as the people pleaser. So I would drop everything to help anybody in the family. Then all of a sudden it came to a point where I was like, I can't help. I'm sorry, I got a lot going on. What do you mean you can't help? Or my grandmother is the best with guilt. Love her, rest in peace with that, but she was the best. She'd be like, what do you mean you can't come over and blah, 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 blah. You don't want to see him anymore, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, here we go with your freaking top story. It's not because of that. But yeah, you hit it on the nail on the head with that. And it was something that it took me back. I had to go through some not fun things to start to realize, who do I really want in my life, or who's really meaningful and who's really there for you, and that was an eye opener for me coming back, because you get to see who are really the people that are there for you for being there for you, and who are the people that aren't. And the only way, and I always say this, if you really want to know who's there for you, start a business and see who helps support you grow your business. That is the easiest way to know. If someone comes, and they, I want to get a deal because such and such have a business, I was always, willing to help in some way as much as I could. But at the same token, I also was like, but I also have to run a business and, help support myself in some way. I'll help in some way, but I can't, they expect it for free. Or maybe when I was under care, I'm getting a little ahead of myself in the years, but from a chiropractic standpoint, but it was one of those things where you start to really, you see the truth in that. And it sucked, because here I am thinking tight knit, close knit, all these things. And then I come back and nothing's changed except me. But then I'm the one who's the problem. And I was just like, okay, something's gonna have to give here. I gotta find new friends. I gotta find new this, because I'm looking to strive, and I'm looking for people who are willing to want to do the same thing. It wasn't that I was judging in any way, shape, or form. It sounds like I was, but I was looking for deeper relationships too. I wanted more real, authentic. And I'm not saying I didn't have some of that before, but yeah, you leave and come back. It was a change in a lot of ways, and it was an adjustment I had to figure out how to do in that process.
Yeah. And for our listeners, if you haven't experienced this yet, or if you're going through it now, or maybe you're going to go through it, what Victor's talking about is real. When you have a circle, especially within America, the first 18 years of our life, you're born into your family for the most part. There's always exceptions. And then you're forced to go to school, which is a broken system. And you're just with the same crew that you're kind of forced to be with. But then when you go to college, or when you move on and start a profession or career, you start getting to make your choices. And what Victor had to decide was, who are the people that are legitimately were there for each other, and who are the people who are just, I hate to say this, but they're just in the background. But then there's a balance, because your family members, like, this is what gets me, that really upsets me. You can have the most flawed family member in the world, but they're still family. You know what I mean? If you have somebody who's a drug addict and they're in your family, you don't support the habit, but you support the human. Now, if that same person was your neighbor, then yeah, there's not that same kind of bond and even responsibility to help them. But when you have family, it is different. You don't let them abuse you. You don't let them belliger you. You have to put healthy boundaries. But when it's all happening, you have to protect your relationship with God and yourself, and then help where you can. That sounds like you were struggling at that point when you came back to figure it out. So for our listeners, Vic, what are some tips you have for kind of sorting through and figuring out which circle people belong in your life?
The easiest thing that I did, and I started to pay attention to this, is let your body tell you, because your body's like the most advanced technological system that will ever exist in humanity, human aspects. There's a feeling. And I always I heard this and I started to apply it to my life, is like, when you're with someone, whether a friend, family, whoever, how do you feel at the end of it? If you feel drained, they're draining you. It's not something they're not giving energy into the relationship. If you feel if you feel drained, you're going to notice it. If you feel energized, you feel great, or feel good about yourself, that means there's a mutual, it could be two things. Because sometimes the person who is taking the energy, you'll feel good about it. But if you usually normally feel good being around that person, then that's usually an indicator that's someone you want to be around. And I knew this, but I still didn't apply it, because I was like, man, I'm going to be cutting out a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, I love being around my family, and still to this day, I love them to death. But in that journey, in that process, I was very really starting to apply this in my life, and was like, okay, I'm just going to start using this. And it's not that I sent anything to them. It was just all of a sudden I'd be like, okay, I'm going to start distancing myself a little bit, just because I'm feeling drained and this is not good for me. And, and if I continue to feel this feeling, what does that mean? Now I know, as I got older, I understand why you want to do that, because if you keep draining yourself, you don't have energy to create what you want in your life. Then you don't have energy to create your dream life, or help to take care of whatever that may be. And when you don't have that there, or if you're stuck in a certain place, this is why you always hear the 5 closest people to you, you average them out, that's who you are. I agree with that to a certain degree, and I disagree, but there are some laws that can support that on that. But the whole purpose is that, imagine you're going to being around people that drain you all day. You're going to be exhausted, and you have to refill your cup back up, so then you could take the energy to go ahead and focus on what it is you want to create for yourself. And that was a big, again, I wasn't taught this. So I had to learn. I mean, even my mom would be like, are you sure do it? And I'm like, hey, this is just where I'm at right now. Like, if I'm making mistakes, I'll own them later. I have no problem doing that. but I have to do this. I just feel like, again, being an empath, I could really feel like I could feel someone's intention right off the bat. Most people can do this anyhow. Or you can feel the depth of the relationship or where they see it at. And when I didn't feel that tight knit bond, then I was just like, man, this is not for me. I want that, because you're asking for something better. You want something deeper. You want something more real. And it comes to that point that it's either you're going to accept what is, and you're accepting lower standards than what your standards are, or you're going to say, you know, I'm going to raise the bar, and this is what my standards are, and this is my boundaries. Here's where I'm going to hold things at, and this is just what I want to have. And the question to ask yourself is, do you feel like you're worthy to have that? And is it really worth you to do that? It's not fun. Any change that you want to make in your life for the better usually isn't fun. It's just part of the way life goes. But it's always greater when you get to the other side. I know that for myself. I don't regret one decision that I made. And that's 17, 18 years ago, 19 years ago. And I'm actually so happy that I did that, because I think it helped me with my career and everything else that I've been doing.
Yeah, and I completely am tracking with you. And to our listeners, think about what Victor's saying and pray about it. And again, you know, family members, they're your family. You tolerate them, but there's boundaries. Like, hey, I love you, Grandma, but I'm going to go for the day. I'll see you next Tuesday. You know, she goes too far. But then at the same time, if you got buddies you hung up with high school and they're just pulling you down, or they just want to waste time and hang out, and you're trying to build your business, it might just be, hey, man, I love you, but I got a different role and mission, and I wish you the best, but I just got to move forward. And you just got to make those hard calls. And what you were saying, Victor, too, you know, that take the 5 closest friends or the 10 closest friends, that's been proven in almost every aspect of life. Even if you don't, you know, believe in the person who might be teaching that, what they're saying as a whole. I mean, just take financially. If you take your 10 closest friends, average out, divide by 10, that's probably your income. I mean, it is. Oh man, my mind just blanked out. Dave Ramsey talks about that all the time. You know, if you want to be a millionaire, why are you hanging out with people who are on welfare? Because that mindset. Now, again, welfare, I'm not making fun of anybody on welfare. I grew up on welfare. But the true role of welfare was to help people during hard times. And when good times come, you get off it and move on in life, and you help other people. Cinderella Man was a fantastic illustration of that, if you've ever read the book or watched the movie. But the problem with American welfare is people live on it, and they get this mindset. And it's not black, white, green, or purple. It's a cultural mindset that's wrong. It's dependent on the government. It's waiting for handouts. It's not moving forward in your life. So that was the point I was trying to make. And Vic, you just raised what were you saying?
No, I agree with you. I love the movie Cinderella Man. It was a great movie.
Yeah,
but
so inspiring. And even though he's from New Jersey, it was still great.
Well, I was going to add to your point, because you brought up a memory. And I remember when I was 20 years old, one of my friends, he was a Filipino guy. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was 25. Loved him to death. We were close in high school. And then, of course, I was very judgmental about people doing drugs of certain sorts. And I was just like, I don't associate myself with that. I regretted it, and I apologized later on. But he would always tell me, dude, you attract drama in your life. You love drama. And I was like, dude, I don't like drama. It freaking drives me nuts. He's like, but you keep attracting drama in your life. Look what you're doing here. Look what you're doing here. And I didn't realize how I was creating that. And that's what was a pivoting point in my life. I was like, I don't want no more individuals in my life who create drama. That was like a standpoint that I had. And I just slowly over time was like, okay, this person's bringing way too much drama. And they're like, I just can't. That's just, it's, you know, or I go hang out with some cousins, and, you know, one's getting pissed at somebody else that they don't even know, and they get into a fight. And it's just like, dude, we're not young anymore. We're not stupid and young. We're getting a little older. We're 23, 24, 25. It's like 26. It's like fighting that should be over with now. Like, if you're going to places and causing trouble and wreck this, I don't want nothing to do with that. That's just not my life. And so that was kind of a big, like, again, what is it, something that you don't, you know, you declare that you don't want to have for yourself, and you just got to stick to it. It's not fun. It's not easy. But like I said, at the end, it's so rewarding.
Yeah, 100%. So now you're back at home. You're going to work and go to school for chiropractic. Where does your life go from there?
Yeah. So it's about 23 now, and was I going to be 23? No, I was going to be 24. So 23, I decided to as I decided to become a chiropractor, I was looking to go to school. So that was my next big step. And just like I moved away for Arizona, I was potentially going to move away for chiropractic. And this is where I started to learn to trust my intuition at this point. I was very intuitive as a kid until about 12 years old. And then I kind of put that down to be more accepted. You know, we do this as children. We want to feel accepted. So sometimes we let things go because I can read people so easily, where they're at, their mood state, what they're focusing on, and all this other stuff. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, you okay? Everything all right? No, I'm fine. I'm fine. So after hearing that like 1,000 times, I was like, okay, maybe it's just me. But I remember I was going to go to school in Iowa, which is like 3 hours from Chicago, where I lived. And I was like, I'll be close. I'll still be farther away, but still close. And then last minute, I hopped on a plane to Dallas to go see a school. And I was like, this is home. And I went to Dallas for chiropractic school. And that was a whole experience in itself. To again go now, I'm considered at, I'm in a graduate school. Here we are to become a doctor of chiropractic, and just a whole different aspect of my life, still striving to learn as much as I can about myself. But this time I took it I did it like on steroids. I was learning as much as I possibly could, not only in chiropractic, but in every facet of life, to try to heal from past traumas. I was in my early 20s, late teens, or early 20s more than anything. I started to look at the conditioning of parents and what they pass on unconditionally, what they don't realize they do. And I was trying to break through all these habits and patterns to just heal myself. And I was on a whole healing, learning journey as much as I could to spark that in me, while also going to chiropractic school in the mix of it all in that short period of time.
And now when you say the parents, you talking about learned behavior? Are you talking about hereditary traits, sins of the father? What are you referring to there?
All the above. All the above. Like, what's the conditioning? What's the ancestral curses? What's the things that, like, limiting beliefs when it comes to finances? I didn't realize this till a little later in my life when I started my own business. But like, what are the things they passed down what were great? But at that time I was focusing on, okay, what's the things that aren't great? What's the things that I have to work through, or I didn't get, or invalidations, or, you name it, in that period of my time, because I was really seeking to heal. I mean, this move when I moved away to Arizona State, I'll never forget that day. I'm outside at my dorm. I'm literally telling my parents, I will see you later. And this is the first time I'm totally alone, without my family. That was hard. But for some reason, the Dallas one hit me hard. It didn't hit me when they left. It hit me because I got there a little too early and I didn't know anybody. So I'm basically like, okay, I'm in another city. I don't know anyone. There's one person, but he's busy with family. And I remember crying, and I was just like, I don't know anybody. This is not fun. This is not what I expected it to be. But what I learned in that process was how to be okay with me. And it wasn't just in a week or two. This is, it took some time, because a lot of times people, are afraid to really get to know within, like sitting with themselves. It's hard for people just to sit with themselves. And this was the first time in my life where I was kind of being forced to do that. And I didn't have no cushion or a safety net where I had family there. Because again, I always had family around, and I didn't have any of that. And it was one of these times in my life I had to learn how to be okay with being alone, which was actually, I didn't realize at the time, a fear of mine. And so that was kind of the beginning of the journey process with that.
And you weren't blaming your parents. And I think our listeners know that. But just to be clear, when you look back in your past to see how you are the way you are today, there's a lot of learned behavior we get from our parents, or I think you phrase it, curses or sins of the father, sins of the past that come to us. But we're learning so we can change and move forward and grow and break those bad habits and curses, so our children don't have them. And we want to just become better men and women. That's what Victor's talking about. He's not blaming his parents. He's just saying, okay, I'm like this. Why am I like this? Oh, now what do I need to do to change me? Correct, Victor?
Exactly, man. That was the premise of everything. And my mom felt like I was blaming her, but I was like, this is just what it is. Like, this is the process. This is just what happened, and now I want to figure this out in some way, shape, or form. So I did this, and I was motivated by that, or inspired, I would say, I wanted that freedom, that emotional freedom. I wanted to be able to have a level to where I didn't have this anxiousness. I didn't have all these different things, all these, people pleasing, never feeling, not being good enough, having a low self-worth. I was just tired of it. And I wanted to know, how can I transcend it? How can I break through some of those things so that I can become more confident within myself, have a better self-worth, and to really be the creator that I'm designed to, or to choose the life I want to have and make that happen. And that's the work that I was going through. I mean, I did stuff like Landmark Forum, and I remember at 24, I called my dad and I apologized and told him, I'm sorry that in high school, I gave you a rough patch and I blamed you for a lot of things. I wrote this in one of my first books, and saying how perception can really mess with you, because when you get stuck in something, you think that this is the problem and you're not taking a step back to see the bigger picture. Because I remember in the Landmark Forum, they were saying like, yeah, and your dad might say, I told myself, my dad's never said, I love you. And so they're like, we might get it. So here I am spilling my heart out, telling him I want to have a better relationship with him. And this is what I want. Dad, can you commit to this? Here I am. I'm in tears on a phone from Dallas, calling my Italian father, who's a man who doesn't express emotions. And I'm sharing with him my heart. And I'm like, yes, would you accept this and this and that? And he's just like, okay. And I'm like, all right, great. Well, that's done. I didn't know what else to do. So I'm like, all right, Dad, I love you. And, I go, I love you. And he just goes, all right, I'll talk to you later. And I was like, no.
Yeah. And then there is something to that generation. Like, they want to say it. They do feel it. They do mean it, but it's just, they were taught if it comes out of their mouth, it's weakness or wrong. So it's tough when you have that, especially when when you have emotional, that's one of your gifts. It's even harder, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, and I blame, there's a lot of things I used to get real mad at my dad about, but then as I got older, I learned that I had to, again, see it in their way, like how they were upbringing, how do they express love? Because I started to learn people express love in different ways. This was before I read the book, The 5 Love Languages, and all the other books I've studied. But it was one of those things I'm like, his way of showing his love is being there whenever you need him. And when he got older, he was more like that. But the way he was when I was younger was financially. If anything came up and I needed something, he'll figure out some way, like whatever that was. That's just how he showed his love. As I've gotten older, he does it more now in actions. And he'll just, my dad has been there for things I needed from office to home to whatever. He will always be there no matter what. And when you can step back and really, and I think this is where a lot of healing came for me. And I always tell this to a lot of people, like, if you could take a step back and just, when you look at people and individuals, that we all express love in different ways. And if we can understand and this is why I say love is understanding, because if you can just understand where the person comes from, you can love them more, because then you have unconditional love, because there's no condition. You understand how they work. You understand their inner workings, their inner world. And that's what I had to do with my dad to really heal, is to see him in a different light. And Landmark Forum and other things I did through spirit. This is where I started tapping into spirituality. This is where I started studying energy medicine. This is where a lot of my spiritual growth came from. I was doing, learning about how to heal with the hands. And so I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but you ever heard the Maluk?
Like the dumb
evil
Maluk?
eye?
The Italian Maluk? Like you're a dumb Maluk?
The Maluk, the evil eye. Yep, the Italian one.
All right.
So you've heard it before, right?
Yeah, I've heard the term used, but it's always, I always heard in the context, like you're a dumb Maluk, like you're an idiot.
This is a little different. So the Maluk is like when someone puts a curse on you. They're
talking
bad about you,
okay.
So they give you the evil eye. And my grandpa, because when I was doing energy medicine, here again, you understand my Catholicism's coming in. Energy medicine is actually the devil's work based on where I was raised. But I felt when I was in chiropractic school, I got really upset that my chiropractor who got me into it was very philosophical. Chiropractic has philosophy and it has art and it has science. But the problem is in the first year and a half of chiropractic school, you learn the exact same stuff a medical doctor does. And I was really bothered by this. I'm like, well, I got to study microbiology and biochemistry and like this stuff. I'm never going to use this stuff. This is not anything exciting about chiropractic. And the philosophy classes I was learning that they called philosophy was basically just the history of the chiropractors that started in the developer and the founder and so forth. And I had to memorize all the 4 wives and all these other things. So I got a little bothered. And but I wanted to understand healing at the lowest level. And the guy who created chiropractic, D.D. Palmer, he was a magnetic healer, which is very similar to Reiki. He also he talked about tone, and he was very, very metaphysical in the work of what chiropractic is. It's kind of a lost art in our profession, but it's one of the things where I was like, okay, I'm not going to learn this in school. So what can I learn this from? So I found out about Reiki. I became a Reiki master and trainer. I studied about 12 different energy techniques. But coming back to the Maluk, the way that works is when you have a curse or, people saying something bad about you, you get a headache. Like it's a headache right in front of your head, sometimes puts pressure on your eyes. And my grandfather was trained to remove it. It's a special blend of prayers that they use, and they can sense. My grandfather, because I was going in the energy work, and I'm going, hold up here. Someone in my family has to do energy work because it has to. Why am I interested in this? And so I've never really, it's one of those things where I started to look back, and my grandfather did it, my grandmother did it, my great grandparents did it, or I think my great grandmother did it. And you can only learn. I don't know why this is. You can only learn on Christmas Eve at like 11 or 12 o'clock at night why that is, I have no clue, but I never got the chance to learn it. But with what I realized when I learned Reiki is I was like, oh my God, I already do this. Like I already, if someone had a headache, I could put my hands on their head for 5 minutes and take them off and they have no more headaches. And I started to go, what is this energy thing? And how does energy work, healing work? Because again, coming from a background that's devil's work, I was breaking that barrier and breaking that belief and saying, maybe it's not, maybe it's something else. But I want to pursue this. I want to learn more about that. And that's how I got into studying energy work. And it kind of like inspired me to learn more and go deeper into it. Not only the main reason why was because I want to understand healing from the deepest level possible, which is energetic. And what I got out of that was spiritual truths and discovering more of the power of who I am, learning universal laws and the fabric of life in some ways. And it was very uplifting and freeing. So a lot of my healing was happening at that time because I was breaking barriers, breaking old conditionings I was told to do and not do, and starting to live my truth in one way or another.
Nice. And yeah, for our listeners, we have people from all sides of the spectrum, but for all of us, when you're hearing Victor talk, don't get all freaked out because all truth comes from God. The Bible's 100% true. And in the Bible, it doesn't maybe use all the same phraseology, but there's energy and there is things that we don't understand. And if you go all the way one side or all the way the other, it's crazy. But if you stay balanced, there's 100% truth. Like you reap what you sow. And, as a man thinketh, so is he. And there's so many verses in the Bible, ask and ye shall receive, that I don't fully understand it, but I know there's some truth to it for sure. So what Victor's going on is a journey trying to find where the truth is in this and, what's obscene or what is devil worship, but what's real. Because I know people who are followers of Christ, they love the Lord and they know about the energy and they use that for good. So again, you can probably do a much better job of explaining this, but sometimes we're in this closed box. Like you said, your family was Roman Catholic. And it's like, what? That? Nope. Gone. Evil. And I'm not saying ever get involved in the occult or ever play with that kind of stuff, because that will hook you and bring you down to a bad, dark place. But when it comes to the gifts that Victor has, that God gave him, and he's using them for good and studying them more, I don't personally see anything wrong with that because God gave it to us. So if that helps at all, or if you want to expand on that thought, Victor, because there's a lot of people, as soon as they hear energy healing or they hear, anything to do outside of a conventional box, they flip out and like click, shut off. So how would you communicate with those people?
Yeah, you have to, the science supports it. So there's science out there. Now, a lot of times I'm known as the guy who bridges the gap between spirituality and science, because there's a technique in chiropractic called BEST, which is known as bioenergetic synchronizing technique. And in their research, what they found out is our fingers have polarities to them. So your thumbs are neutral. And then I forget I think the left hand, it's negative, positive, and the right hand's positive, negative. And when you use these 2 points, you create circuitry in the body, you create healing into certain ways and certain forms and so forth. That's really the essence of what it is. It's just when we do, like if you just take your hands and if you go really fast and just like Mr. Miyagi, and he just goes real fast with his hands, and if you just separate them, you'll feel like a buzzy feeling in your hands. That's energy. So we have energy all around us. And even in the Bible, if you look at what Jesus did, he healed by his hands. That it's just knowing how these principles work and what they do. But a lot of times, again, you hear energy work or you hear stuff like this, and it's like, wait a minute, no. And depending on where your upbringing may be, it's one of those things. But it literally is just understanding energy in the essence of we are energy in some way, shape, or form. Just like when I studied, like I was learning auras, and people are like, auras, what's aura? That auras don't exist. And I was like, auras do exist. I'm like, what do you mean? I could see them. I could show you. And then they'd be like, oh, that's that woo crazy stuff, right? But and now as I've evolved and learned more, because I'm a left brain, right brain guy. So I love the right side of my brain. That's the abstract thinking, energy work, emotions, empath, all that great stuff. But I also know that we live in a very left brain dominant world. So I always look for science of something to tie the connection to say, well, if you don't like this, well, here's the scientific way. So like some people, when I talk about auras, are like, oh, that's way too out there. All right, just call it a biophotonic field. It's the same thing. It's just a scientific term that they discovered it. I remember when it first came out.
Yeah, and there's 100%. No, I didn't mean to cut you off. There's a delay. I apologize. But there's like, you can take science, not government science, real science, and you can turn the frequency. And there's like, do you ever see a sand table? Each frequency makes a shape. That's real. That's how God created the world. I don't fully understand it, but that's not hocus pocus. That's the world God made. Now, when I was 18, I got a tumor. I was sick for years, but they finally found a tumor I had, took it out, grew back, took it out again, grew back, gave me radiation. I'm dying, dropped to 135 pounds. And then I heard about this chiropractor who did something. And back then it was like hocus pocus. And it was called CRA, contact reflex analysis. And I remember going to him and I'm like, I looked him right in the eye and I said, hey man, I'm fine with dying. I really am. I said, but I really don't want to suffer, but if it's God's will, I will. So I'm just asking you straight up, is anything you're doing have to do with the occult or Satan or any kind of demonic worship? Because if it is, I'd rather die. But if not, let's try it. And he walked me through it. He showed me some Bible verses. He talked about what he was doing. And he was explaining it as energy and it's the world God made. And the stuff he did, I'm like, man, I don't understand it. But you know what happened? I started getting better. He pointed out what was wrong, what I needed, and cut out all dairy, all sugar. I started getting better slowly but surely. And now, 25 years later, I'm fat and healthy. There we go, right? So I don't have to understand it all, but I do know that it does work. So as you're listening to Victor, pray about it, think about it. And there's a lot more. The Bible says we're not struggling and wrestling with the things seen. It's the things unseen, right? The dark places, the wicked rulers. But there's also so much we don't understand that God does and protects us every day, that surrounds us. And then he puts the Holy Spirit inside of us. And there's more power inside one Christian. There is evil in the whole world. So I'm tracking with you. I just wanted to make sure we took a break real quick to talk to our listeners, because there's some people, they were just taught like you were as a kid. That is wrong if the priest doesn't say it. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's wrong. If the priest doesn't do it, it's wrong. When a lot of the stuff the priests do, that's not in the Bible, baby. Read your Bible. So let's pick up and keep going with your story. So you're in school, you're learning, you're growing, you're seeing there's things outside of the world and nature and science that God made. So where does your story go from there, Victor?
Yeah. If you mind, I'll just share one thing to help with everything I'm sharing is that like electricity, we don't know how electricity works per se, but we know how to utilize it.
Yeah.
Right. We don't know how, it's free flowing electrons, but how the heck does that work? I don't know, we know how to use it. It's the same thing when it comes to the energy world and doing energy work and stuff like that. It's like, or even like some stuff that I got into with coaching, with that from an energy perspective, it's like, yeah, I don't know half that stuff. I how that all process, I didn't create it, but I know how to utilize it. And that's the difference there. But yeah, in chiropractic, it was a fun, it was the pivoting point in my life to, I remember when I was 12 years old, I told my mom, I'm going to figure out this thing called life. So I was crazy. And the reason why I mentioned that to her was because I didn't understand why some people suffered, some didn't, why I didn't have a lot of things, but I had other family members or friends who had every single toy, game, console, all the 50, 60 games, all these different things. And so I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So in that journey, this is where my foundational principles started, of really just getting a grasp on life and breaking, coming from, again, Roman Italian Catholic family. I've read the Bible twice, all these different things, and then looking and learning and saying, well, where's the truth? In other words, that cross over, where are things that I can, there's one aspect of it, but I can learn it in something else and just help deepen my studies in that and so forth. And that's where, again, fun times, but it was again a time for me to discover me and let my mind run wild. I started to learn that I love learning. I never really cared about school. My dad used to always be like, you don't get straight A's, you should get straight A's. I cared less about getting straight A's. It doesn't, I didn't have the motivation. I just didn't, school was never, I always tell people I don't like school. And they're like, you went to become a chiropractor, you had to like school. Nope. Didn't like school. Didn't like chiropractic school either. It was fun. I love the people I met. I love some of the teachers I had, but the whole process, you have to understand the conditioning of school. School loses creativity. It takes creativity out of people because it's so standardized. And it's one of those things where we naturally don't learn that way. We learn vastly different than how school is. We go against life. And I don't want to make this a rant about school, but it's like, when you look at school and life, life you go and do, and then you learn from it. School is you learn, then you go do, then you take a test. And it's like, that's not how life works. And the best learning I've ever had, I had an organic chemistry teacher do this. He actually helped me because I became a teacher at one point for just a small semester. We go into the classroom. Now, organic chemistry, I was like, oh man, everyone say organic chemistry is one of the hardest classes you're gonna have to take in undergrad. And you literally would walk into the class and he goes, okay, he hands out this piece of paper and he goes, go ahead and fill that out. And you work with a partner and answer all these questions. And then after you guys are fully done, we'll give you 20, 30, 40 minutes, whatever you need. And then I'm going to lecture off everything afterwards. And I was like, this is so weird. Normally you learn and then you do the homework later. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go with this. Long story short, I never had to study for any of his classes. Not one. This is organic chemistry, one of the hardest ones. And I got straight A's in all his, I had him for chemistry and I had him for organic chemistry, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. And I got straight A's on it. And the point of the lesson I'm trying to share is that a lot of times when you're going into things, you'll find gaps, you'll find things you don't understand. You're going to do some research and then you hear someone explain it the second time, it gets absorbed easier into you through that process. So I don't know why I'm going off on this tangent, just felt like I had to, but the school system. So yeah, it was one of the things where while I was in school though, I learned early on that I wasn't going to learn chiropractic at school. Now, this may sound weird to a lot of the listeners. I'm going to chiropractic school to become a chiropractor, but yet I know that I'm not going to learn chiropractic while I'm in school, because you have to, there's organizing bodies that say what a chiropractor needs to learn. It's called the CCE, Chiropractic Continuing or Chiropractic Examiners. I forget what the first C is, but long story short, so I was a workshop junkie. I would go to every workshop possible. They had free workshops once a month from a supplement company. I go to every single nutrition workshop there was. I learned so much there. I would any money that I had saved, because we get our student loans and then we had a little excess for cost of living and so forth. I would save up that money and I would pick out all the workshops. I think I went to like 40 paid workshops while I was in school. Yeah, imagine the interest on that now. But it's one of those things where I knew that if I really wanted to be a great chiropractor and learn it, I had to get out. I had to go outside the school system to do that. And it's sad. Don't get me wrong. I had great teachers. I'm not bashing the school or anything. I love the school for what it was. I had a great mentor there. One of the presidents of the president of the school took me out to lunch in my second trimester, which was a game changer for my life. But it was one of the things where it was just, I even asked him, I'm like, why are we learning things that is not going to benefit us? And he literally told me it's because of the credentialing. We have to give you guys a certain amount of classes in sciences in order to be credentialed to a credentialed school to have you graduate as be a doctorate of chiropractic. So I'm like, it's not even about being the best chiropractors and learning what really chiropractic is. It's fulfilling something else that doesn't even serve us. So that was kind of pushing there. But again, I was just learning. I was learning and experimenting. I was being a kid again. And you have to understand my background growing up, as I shared a little bit about, I didn't share this part. Like, I didn't have a dad that let me really experiment. I was called a dreamer, and I was somebody that, I couldn't really just let my imagination run wild and let me just learn. And so when I got into chiropractic school, I had no limits on that. After I broke through some limiting beliefs, I was able to just soar and learn as much as I can. And I soaked that up, and I've been like this ever since. And it's just one of those things. I love to learn new things of any way, shape, or form to help me be a better human being for the world. And it was a joy to go through chiropractic school. I learned a lot. I fought some resistance as I got into energy work, because chiropractors, some of my classmates thought that doing that kind of work wasn't chiropractic, and we would go back and forth, and it wasn't fun, but it is what it is. But I used to teach energy and teach people what energy really was, how it affects the body, how do you notice the difference, and a lot of that. So it was a lot of fun. That was chiropractic school in a nutshell.
Nice. So now between there and today, where did your life go? What's the journey been like?
So yeah, I mean, I got out of school, and the chiropractor who got me into it all wanted to potentially have me work for him. We were talking on and off while I was in school, and I went to venture into that. My dad was kind of like going, okay. My dad still, at that point in my career, getting out of school, didn't understand why I became a chiropractor. He couldn't put two and two together. So he wasn't really accepting of it. He wouldn't say that verbally.
Before you go on, how old
Yeah.
are you? If you want me to ask, are you in your 30s, 40s? How old are
I'm
you?
26.
No, you're 26 then.
Yeah.
But
How
how
am I
old are you?
now?
Yeah,
39.
39. So when we were growing up, I'm 45. Chiropractors were not, like, insurance didn't cover chiropractors. They weren't considered real doctors. They were like, oh, that's a bunch of crap. But yet people I know who went to chiropractors got a lot of benefit that the medical doctors weren't giving them. So you were growing up in that fold when it wasn't even acknowledged by medical science as a worthy profession. So I can see why your dad, being more traditional, is like, you're wasting your time and money. There's no truth to it, because that's what society said. Because if the medical doctors healed everybody, they wouldn't be making money, right?
Exactly. I mean, my mom has been going to a chiropractor since I was 1 year old, and she's still under chiropractic care 38 years later. But yeah, my dad, he just didn't understand it. He didn't understand chiropractic, and all that. And that was fine, but he really thought I should go work for him. My dad, he was kind of like a friend of the family. Like, the chiropractor we knew, we had family members, or we call them family members. They're just really good friends of the family. But we had crossover. Like, some of them and my dad's friends were also his cousin. So like, he knew his whole family and everything. So they're paisans, in other words. Or for those who don't know what that term means, it means countrymen, which is like Italians who know each other. They're close friends, or they're just consider themselves friends already. But it's, so my dad thought, oh, he can work with them. He'll help mentor me and all that. But when it came to sit down, we didn't hit eye to eye with things. And I had a coach at the time. I was very ambitious. I hired a coach like 4 months before I graduated to get chiropractic down, the business down, and know what I need to do. And so I had a vision, and I wanted to run my own vision. And my dad was like, oh, they didn't like that, kind of a setback, me choosing not to work with him. And then it was about a 6-month journey. I had some hiccups. I had an investor who was interested in investing in me, and then last minute he backed out. Thankfully, I had a clause in the lease where if me and the landlord didn't agree on some things after this point, then we can just, the contract dissolves automatically. And thankfully, we didn't do this intentionally. There was some things that they were very like controlling of how our office can be. Decorations, we had to have high-end stuff. I'm like, who are you to tell me I got to go spend $10, $8 a linear foot for trim when I just rather go put some rubber stuff on and be done with the day? So thankfully we didn't agree. It all didn't work out. But I'm 4 months, 5 months after after chiropractic school, don't have a business. I have massive amount of debt, and I was kind of paralyzed. So thankfully there was a doc who she paid it forward. She actually had a doc help her out when she first started, gave him really low rent, and gave him opportunity of a lifetime. I found a doc who let me rent out her 1,600 square foot space. When she wasn't there, first 3 months were only $300 a month. Second 3 months was $600. And then it was going to be, I think it was like 600. And then 600 for 6 months. And then the last 3 months was like $800 or $900. And I looked and I'm like, holy cow, I got a whole office space. I got tables. I got, everything I need. And she's only going to charge me that much. So it gave me a little bit of a leaping pad to jump and get my business started. Cause again, I didn't have any money. I tried to start out at my parents' house. I got a table. I bought some diagnostic equipment, and I had a system I bought, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to put this on credit card. Everything's going to work out, because I was that ambitious. It didn't work out. I had a struggle. I was trying to pay those things off plus everything else. And this was right after, 2009. I graduated 2009 in September. This is right after the recession in October. So what started to happen, I'm trying to start my business. April 2010, I start to get an independent contract deal where I can work out of this chiropractor's office. I'm like, okay, great. We're sharing expenses. Well, I'm helping her with the rent by, she's giving me that low fee. But at the same token, I'm trying to build a business inside a business, which is actually a lot harder than you think, because I can't put a name on anything. I can't have any of my stuff there, in the sense of I'm another chiropractor there. And so I really wasn't really on my own, or even, I would even call it starting my own business. I just had a space where I had to do a lot of extra leg work to try to get people to come. And, but anyhow, long story short, I mean, things were going good. A year later, I was able to grow out of that business, but money wasn't coming as well, because student loans the banks weren't being friendly. They're like, you got to pay full amount. There's no cut, no discount. So I used to joke around and say, I have a house with a mortgage, but I don't know where the house is, and I don't own the keys, but I have the bill coming every month. And it got to a point, I wasn't growing the business fast enough, and I was contemplating on going bankrupt, but I was like, I don't want to go bankrupt. Here comes the one thing I didn't want to have happen. I saw financial struggle growing up. I didn't want to have that in my life. The one thing that I was trying to do everything right to make sure I didn't get there. And it came to a point in my life where it took me a year to make the decision, where I was like, I'm officially going to go bankrupt, because I got to a point in the business where my personal was dragging me down, and I did everything on credit cards to try to make things work. And with the student loans and everything else, if I could have got a break on the student loans, I could have made everything work. But unfortunately, they weren't giving in, and I had to make a choice. And so I was like, either I let go of my vision and dream of running my own office for now, or I let this go. It gives me a little bit of breathing room. And then God, I was like, then I can serve. If that's what I'm meant to do, then that's what I'll do. And so I ended up doing it. And long story short, I never looked back. The business started to flourish. Things started to grow. And I was able to, now at this point in my life, I'm looking back, because I understand everything happens through me as I am. So wherever I'm vibrating at, wherever my, this is why I'm using universal laws and so forth. And I'm going, so I created that in my life. Why did that show up then? And so I started to self-reflect on that. And I saw where your mind is, where energy flows. I started to see how in my own life, where I was putting my focus, and my focus wasn't on growth and abundance and all that. My focus was on trying to pay the bills every month, trying to grow the business and seeing the lack in my business. And what happens is wherever your mind or your focus goes, energy flows. Wherever energy flows, manifestation is going to grow. And so that's going to become your reality. And that's what that's what I realized in that moment. And so then I was like, wow, I didn't just figure this out overnight, but it took a process. And I sat there and I go, holy cow, this is something that I'm not going to let this happen ever again, because I understood what caused it and created it. It wasn't the credit cards. It wasn't the student loans not being friendly and all that great stuff. No, it was me. It was my mindset that was attracting that into my life. And that came a huge pivotal point in my life, because from there, like I said, my business started to grow. I doubled, then I tripled. And then in 2 years, I tripled, and I had almost 6 times in profit growth. And it's not about the profits. I'm bringing that up, but I started to see within myself the impact I wanted to make in the community. The money I made was just showing me a reflection of the impact I had in my community. And it was able to shift that mindset and to get focused on what really mattered. And that was a huge shift in my life, because I started to focus on what basically got me excited to live. What gave me something that I could leave this world with? Because you can accumulate all the money in the world, you ain't taking it with you. Not happening. No one has. And no, I don't think it's in the physical realm, so it never will. But it's one of those things that I wanted to take other things that meant something to me, that I know that when I pass and transition, I can take all that with me.
Yeah. And I want to kind of have a fork in my questions here. It's like I want to go 2 directions. So let's do the quick one first. I personally don't believe in debt. I avoid debt like the plague. I have debt on my home because it's really an investment. But other than that, I don't want to be in debt. And I try to teach, hopefully I've taught my kids that. hopefully my clients, I help with that. And some people are wired where they think I have to go in debt to start a business. I know I didn't. I know my clients don't. And we can go large scale or small scale. So for you, you're talking about your story and the pressure it put on you and the burden and the distraction that debt was. Looking back now, for people who are thinking about starting a business who are in debt, do you think it, and you can disagree with me, but do you think you should avoid debt like the plague and find other ways and wait till God provides, or the universe, or whatever someone calls it? Or do you think there are times, when you leverage debt? What's your opinion on that right now, Victor?
It's one of those things. I would say it depends. I guess it depends on the business you are. Like I have a coaching business. I started up on as a side business while I was having my chiropractic office. It was $0. I did it with no debt whatsoever. I think as a chiropractor, it's one of those things where you're gonna need a table. You're gonna have to find a table somewhere. You can build one, but you're gonna need your certain amount. I always say, like when I give any business advice, I always say, what's the bare necessities that you may need? Or, because even if you could wait till you have the money. That's one thing. Like if I look back at my journey, I wouldn't have did the purchases I did. I would have just said, you know what? I'm just going to get a table and I'm going to find a used table. I'm going to find a chiropractor and I'm just going to let it come to me, right? Like God, universe, Allah, whatever you like to call it. It's going to bring that to me in some way, shape, or form. And as I get older, and the more I practice with these things, you can even choose, like, you can say, hey, I want to get this table for free. I'm going to let that show up. And
it does.
I've worked, and it does. I've had
It does.
a client that wanted to have a bike, and it was like a $7,000-8,000 bike. I'm like, holy cow. And I was like, well, what would be an ideal thing for you if you want to attract that into your life? Like, what would be a cool, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened kind of a deal? She goes, I get it for free. I said, okay, put that out there and see what happens. And she thought I was crazy. And then all of a sudden it showed up. I've had this happen with business and people tripling and doubling, tripling their profits, not doing anything new. I did this in my own business. I grew my business without having to put more money into it because of that. But I just, again, coming back to the debt thing, I think it's you can leverage other people's money. There's many different schools of thought there, but I also believe it depends on what industry you're kind of getting into. Like if I want to have an IV clinic with vitamins and so forth, I'm going to have to get those, somehow fund those things in some way, shape, or form. But like I was starting my own business when I was having an investor, I didn't have money, and I did put myself in debt a little bit, but the investor was going to originally cover that cost plus everything else for me because I was already trying to invest. So that way I was at paid off that debt, and then I would have had money for capital, for my operating costs and so forth to manage for 6 months. So that way, then from there, I had to start paying him back. And I was like, yeah, 6 months. I had a couple deals on the side that was going to give me like access to like 15,000 email line. And I was like, okay, that I should at least get 1%, maybe interested in that. I'm not saying they're all going to come. I said, even if I get 0.001%, that's a good start. And so I'm hoping I'm answering the question in its full detail.
Yeah, no. I just want people to recognize that debt brought you a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And it actually kept, like you said, once you started doing your passion, not only were you helping people and you felt fulfilled, but the money flows. And so many people are convinced to borrow. And the Bible says the borrower is servant to the lender. And what's our government in America trying to do? They're trying to enslave everyone by getting them to borrow. So they're your master. They control you. And I just know in my own personal life that, okay, like people make fun of me for driving old cars. But you know what? I don't have to worry about if somebody puts their feet on my dashboard. I don't have to worry about if a shopping cart racks into it. I don't have to worry about if I want to smoke a cigar while I'm driving my nice old truck. I can do what I want and I have freedom and enjoyment. And I don't care what other people think about me. Because I've had people say, why don't you buy a new car? I'm like, because I don't want to. Why go in debt, or why waste money that I can use for something else? So when people are starting a business, and I coach so many people and they're like, oh, I got to get this loan, I got to get that loan. I'm like, why? Why do you need to do that? Could you buy a used table? Or if it's they're starting a large company that has a big initial investment. You don't have to get a loan, you can get investors. There's a huge difference. If the business goes belly up, you don't have to pay that money back. Investors know what they're getting into. On a loan, just like Victor said, he went to school, got a loan, and the bank's like, I don't care. They're just going to be hounding you and putting pressure on you. You're going to be spitting blood. So just think about alternatives, pray about alternatives, but now talk about, I don't want to go all the way left or all the way right. We want to find balance, but whether you call it the law of attraction, whether you call it the secret, whether you call it manifestation, you really can, ask and you shall receive. You can talk to God and tell him what you want and he'll bring it to pass if it's in his will. So talk about how you learned that lesson and a little bit of how it works, Victor.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I can't remember all the quotes nowadays, but from looking at just the Bible itself, right? Because I was looking for, as I learned this, I was like, okay, where are some of these things that show up? Like, is it in the Bible? Is there stuff in there? You reap what you sow, right? When it comes to looking at how to, why is vision so important in an individual creating their life? Well, Proverbs 29:18 says, the people with a vision will perish. Vision is very critical. Well, why is vision critical? Well, this is where I started asking questions, because I'm like, well, how's the universe? From what they say, the universe, you have to communicate in images and feelings. That's kind of how the communication pattern works. That creates electromagnetic fields, and that electromagnetic field becomes more of attraction to pull it into your life. That was good and all dandy, but I needed some more concrete science stuff too, again, because I shared it in one way. I was very right brain, spiritual, all that stuff. And I was sharing religion from scripture, from the Bible, from the Hindu scripture, from Buddhism, pulling stuff. And yeah, people were like, that's woo-woo stuff, or that's out there. No, that's all this stuff. I was like, okay. Got into the world of quantum physics and started understanding quantum physics, what it's proving when it comes to consciousness, what it's proving when it comes to how to live life and the fabric of life. And I was like, holy cow, this sums everything up for me. So when someone says, law of attraction, the universal law of vibration is basically, Nikola Tesla said, I think it was just shy of 1900, but let's just go in 1900 or 1905. It was in the beginning. He said, if we start to look at the universe as vibration, energy, and a frequency, then what we will do in just what we will accomplish in the last 10 years or 20 years will happen all in 1 year. Now, what does that all mean? We understand that science has proven and shown now that the universe is made up of all energy. What is energy? Well, energy is just, it's consciousness is another word for it, if you like to say. It's a living, aspect of it. So when we look at quantum physics, there was a study that came out called the observer effect. And what it did is it showed that how we see something, when as the Bible says, you seek and you shall find, how we see something is how it's going to show up in your world. Now, that's not what the study showed. The study was looking at light and seeing, is it in a wave format or is it in a particle? Particle is the physical, it's in the physical realm. Wave format, it's in a non-physical. You need sensors to be able to pick it up. And so what happened was, as the light goes through this thing, and all of a sudden you see it in a wave format, but the scientists aren't looking at it. As soon as the scientist goes to look, it would go from wave and shift to particle. And they're like, holy cow, this is a particle now. And then they go look away, and eventually it'll fade back into the wave. And they did this a gazillion times. And what that meant is that, again, how we see something, what we believe, what we project to see into the world, what you see in your mind's eye, that is what your experience is going to be in life. And that's going to have a vibrational point. So when we talk about the law of vibration, well, there's so many things that have come out. Our body is a tool that you can use. In 1960-ish, I think it was 66 to be exact, Dr. Goodhart came out with something called applied kinesiology. It was muscle testing. You can actually test a muscle on the body, and the electromagnetic field shift on your body is going to either tell you it's a positive good thing or a negative thing. So we can get yes and no's answers from this. This has all been scientifically proven. Your body, you can do it just from finger rubs. You create, every time you hit something that's not true, your body creates this micro moisture, which creates friction from the sympathetic nervous system. So this is all science stuff that's be able to prove these things to kind of support that. But to go outside of that, there was a great book I highly recommend everyone, if you want to understand more about energy and how energy works, the influence of, again, remember, it's where we understand how to utilize it. So there's a book called The Hidden Messages of Water by Dr. Masaru Emoto. What they did is they looked at water structure. They put love on there, or they said love to it. And then they flash froze it really quick. and they looked at the chemical structure of it. And when you looked at love, it was a beautiful hexagonal form, which is a very high, good structure of water. We absorb it more. It helps our body detox and all these good things. But it was very crystallized, very beautiful. They did the same thing with hate. They did this fast freeze. They look at it, very disorganized, no crystallization form at all. Now, this is water. How the heck is that happening? All right. They took that further and they did this with music, different ranges of emotions, pictures, all these different stuff. So there's a hidden message in life that we can utilize to understand more deeper truths in some way, shape, or form. We've done this with, I was going to share something else. I went blank in the middle of that with proving it. But anyhow, so looking at that perspective, this is where, again, coming back to the law of vibration. The law of vibration states wherever you are at vibrating at is the only experience you can have at that moment. And so here's water changing its chemical structure in the midst of what we project to it. Imagine what a thought does, because a thought, we have proven now, we know that a thought is actually, it's non-physical. We know that, but we also know that it has an it's electrical in its science form. When you add a thought and you tie an emotion to it, now you've created an electromagnetic field. We're able to prove this. And they could do this with special scans on the brain and so forth to, look at what fires up and so forth in this process. So now all of a sudden we know that when we have a thought, we tie an emotion to it, you're creating an electromagnetic field. Electromagnetic fields are vibration. It's a scientific term for vibration. And that vibration creates a certain aspect, a certain thing. And this is why from just water, they've done experiments with plants. They took a plant, they put two plants next to each other, and there was kids that would show up and they would tell this one plant, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so blessed, all this. This is why prayer works, because when you have the right intention, prayer works. So they said love to this one plant. The other plant, they said, I hate you, wish you would die, all these other things. They fed it the same thing, the same soil, the same nutrition, the same everything. Everything was constant except that one difference. 4 days. The one plant that got love, vibrant. The one plant that didn't was wilting. They've done studies on this to go even further. Again, setting intention, the power of love, and so forth. Love overseeds nutrition for an infant baby. If an infant does not have nutrition, you can keep it skin to skin with a mom, with love and intention, all that stuff, and it helped them to survive. There was babies that were going to die, and they had a mom held skin to skin contact, and it gave them opportunity to live. I mean, that's how powerful love can be. And this is energy in its essence. So when we're going back to, again, law of vibration, these are things that are just, they're fields that exist that we create, we're emitting. And then the law of attraction will come next, because again, like I said, vibration, you only experience where you are at that level. It's the same thing like you were talking about the sand, it's called somatics. And so what you're doing is you're shooting a certain frequency, and it gives you a sacred geometrical figure. Those are vibrations, those are frequencies. Each frequency shows a different reality, a physical aspect that shows up. That's the same thing when it comes to this. So law of vibration leads to law of attraction that's going to attract into your life. It's going to pull into your life what you're vibrating at. And then manifestation only happens when it goes from non-physical to physical, when you actually are seeing in your life. Just like when they turn on that frequency, there's the vibration, law of attraction, sand's going to it's going to bind to a certain structure, right? And then when it's finally there, it's in the physical form, and that's what we can see there. I hope I kind of explained all that.
I think you did an excellent job. And our listeners can we're going to get to the end. They can reach out to you. They can do more research on the topic. We got to be our own advocates. We got to, study to show thyself approved, to work unto God, being not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And going back to love is the most powerful force. God is love. And when Jesus was here, what did he say? Top 2 commandments: love God, love thy neighbor as thyself. That's love. That's the frequency. That's the energy. That's what it's all about. So take us through the rest of your story, Victor. So now you're learning all this, you finished school, you're starting your business, you're going to the School of Hard Knocks on top of the School of Chiropractic Care. Bring us from there to today.
Yeah. So after I hit my financial peak about 5-6 years in, I was burned out. Every 4 to 6 months, I was hitting burnout. But I thought when I hit that level of, financial success, I'd be fulfilled, and I was the opposite. I was not satisfied. I looked at my wife. She worked in the office with me, and I looked at her and I'm like, I don't know if I want to continue doing chiropractic. I mean, this is what it is. I feel like I'm always going uphill. And she's just like, for you to say that, that's, and I'm like, I know, for hearing that, for me, that's rare. And I was like, what if we do this? What if it's not that? What if it's just, we're not aligned with what our truth is? What if I'm not aligned to what I really want to do? So I took a really hard look at my office, and when her and I, because my wife ran the office, I was the chiropractor. I always joke, I'm like, my wife runs everything here. I'm just the chiropractor. She tells me what to do, and I just keep running around. But long story short, I really had to sit with myself, and I really did some deep soul seeking. And I was like, what really gets me excited? And so I remember, the universal God will always provide. It'll show up in many ways. So I kept seeing things on pediatrics. And I was like, yeah, I remember when I was in chiropractic school, I was with the pediatric club. I was really excited, but something happened there that just really, the head person of it really kind of turned me off, and I just went away from it, and I never went back to it. And I was like, pediatrics, maybe I might be interested. And then I kept seeing stats of how sick our children are getting. I think 53, this is back then, 53% of children have some sort of chronic illness. And I was like, this, not on my watch. ADHD is on the rise. Autism will be 1 out of 2 by 2032. I was like, this isn't happening on my watch. If I can do anything, I'm going to shift there, because I was like, these kids, these moms need to understand. I was more looking at the moms. And I say moms just because eventually even in my office, 99% of the time I was working with moms when it came to kids. But I shifted my practice, and I said, if we're going to make this change, and we're going to really stick to what's true for us in this office, we're going to have to let go of some patients, because they just didn't fit the model. And so we took a 40% hit on purpose. And I got really purposeful. I stopped learning. I was reading 80 to 120 books a year. I was doing everything I was told to do in business. I was listening to podcasts. I was watching videos, doing workshops, reading all the time. And it was one of those things where I didn't listen to music, and I was just being so hyper-focused. So yeah, I got to my result, but at the same token, my marriage could have been way better. Not that we had problems, but we could have strengthened it by sure a lot. My health was on and off. I would have back issues showing up from time to time and whatnot. I mean, my mindset wasn't as sharp as I like it to be. I wasn't always in an upstep beat mood. And so all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? Forget everything I learned. I'm not going to continue learning at this moment. I'm going to let life, God, whatever you want to call it, it's going to guide me and pull me to what I need to learn. I'm going to let life teach me, and I'm going to use everything I know. Neuroscience, quantum physics, spiritual truths, all the stuff that I've studied all these years. I'm going to trust the process and just trust that. Here's what I know about universal laws, is that as long as I focus on my vibration, I just know I have a vision. And as long as I focus on my vibration, that vision will eventually come to me. And so I practiced that and did that. A year and a half later, in the first 6 months, I only had 5% patient volume of pediatrics. Pediatrics means age 0 to 17. And 6 months later, I'm at 48%. Did nothing new. Didn't change anything in the office. I didn't do anything. I just, my intention totally changed. So then I started to practice that. And at that point, 2017, 2018, I started to go, you know what? I'm tired of hearing the business model, because what we hear in business, you got to grind, you got to hustle, you got to put in the sweat equity, you have to sacrifice your time, health, love, and family. You have to put in hard work. You have to put all this hard effort. And I was just like, this is backwards to how nature works. It's backwards to how the body works, that's for sure. And even parts of how the universe works, even from the physical or from the physical side. And so I was like, I'm like, I want to look into helping entrepreneurs create their dream life effortlessly. Because I did that. I never, from that moment on, when I made that shift in my life, I never had to worry about my business ever again. I didn't have to worry about the next thing I had to do. What is the next process? Because I'm not saying it was all just, I never had a negative year ever, or like 1 year less than the other. But one of the things I was always like, man, what's the next thing I got to focus on? How do I keep this momentum going? And instead I sat back and was like, it's going to come to me. The idea, the thought, circumstance, the partnership, whatever is going to show up. God, I always just joke. I say, God created the earth in 6 days, the heavens and the earth in 6 days. I'm like, so for what I need in my life, I think he'll be able to figure that out for me. He'll bring something very glorious for me. So I just started to go in that process, and it was amazing how my life just continued to grow. We started to expand. We had a deeper practice. But not only that, my relationship with my wife got the best we ever had. We had, our communication. I always say our business really taught us how to have a better marriage when we finally made this shift. my health. I never had a back issue ever since 2017. I haven't been burned out since 2017. I've been more fulfilled, more passionate, more excited, everything I do. And so from that experience of my life and everything I know about health, I was like, business owners need to know this. And this is where I started to shift gears and I started coaching with entrepreneurs. And I've been doing that for the last 3-ish years. And, this last year in January is the moment where I went full time. I moved from Chicago, Illinois. I went to Knoxville, Tennessee, something my wife and I were wanting to do for the last 4 years. And we finally did it. We wanted to start a family, and we knew that if we did stay in Chicago and had a family, we would never leave. Again, you've heard the backstory of how big of a family I have, although I'm not as close to a lot of my family members, but my mom and dad they're my heart and soul. And it's one of those things where I from that moment in my life to go after a bigger vision of mine and try to make that my reality now. And that is having a bigger reach, because as much as I had a big practice in Illinois, when you look at the reach of the influence, how many people I was really helping, it wasn't at the level what I would be like, oh my God, I'm really making a huge dent. Even in just in my community, it was less than 0.01%. And I was just like, how am I really shifting and helping the world in some way, shape, or form? But I can feel like I can do more in a different capacity as being a coach. And it is. And I've been blessed I did that, because half my clients are chiropractors. And when I'm working with them, especially some of them that focus on family wellness, pediatrics, pregnancy, and all of that, I can pour into that more. And I feel like my little part of me is helping them, being part of them in their journey. So that's kind of what has summed me up to this process. And it's been, even with COVID hitting, I remember when COVID came out, just to kind of tie up to how this all works, not letting go. My wife was worried. We potentially could have been shut down, but I knew we weren't going to be, because we're primary care physicians as chiropractors. And so when it happened, the lockdowns came in Chicago, our business for that first month took a 40% hit. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, we're good. Everything's going to be fine. It's all going to work out. All of a sudden, so-and-so referred something to where I was like, it was a program on Facebook ads. And I'm like, I never done Facebook ads, but might as well do them. People need help right now. We really looked at why we would do them. But anyhow, long story short, 3 months later, we broke records in our office. And again, my wife was always like, you're so calm about this. And I'm like, it's going to be perfectly fine. Like, everything's going to work out the way we wanted it to. Just got to sit back, be patient, and trust the process.
Nice. So that kind of bled into the next section. We transitioned from where you are today into from your past to where you are today and where you're heading. Before we move into where you are exactly today, where you're heading, how can our listeners get a hold of you? Any special offers you want to put out there? Is there anything between your birth and today, Victor, that we missed, or are we ready to move forward?
I think we're ready to move forward. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I mean, it's funny when you start talking about your past, there's things you can remember right off the top of your bat. And then when you start to talk, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that part. Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. But no, I think we had a lot of good points in there. I think we're good to move forward.
Awesome. So if somebody wants to reach you to learn more, maybe connect for coaching, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, my website's my hub. So it's empoweryourreality.com. Right at the top right corner, I have, if it resonates with you, if you're looking to create your dream life effortlessly, or you're struggling, or there's a challenge you face and you just can't break through, or you want to get your results a little faster, I do a free call, 30 minutes. I dive into learning all about you, and I'll give you some action steps at the end. And then if I know I can help you, I'll share how I can do that and so much more. I do have some free resources on there. I have a free ebook on the power of visualization, sharing some really cool studies on how our mind can really manipulate matter. It's really cool. This is like just starting to, like, it even baffles me as being a chiropractor, how we can change our muscle sizes just from visualization, but that's a whole thing in there. And then on the bottom left, if people or if you're on social media, you want to connect with me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. I do post about 4 to 5 times a week of videos of things like what we've been talking about here a little bit, that you can find me, and so forth.
Excellent. And I will put links to your contact info on your website in the show notes. So ladies and gentlemen, just whether you're an Apple or Spotify or YouTube, just check out the show notes and you'll be able to get a hold of Victor. So Victor, thank you so much for your time today, brother. You truly are a remarkable man. I'm glad that we are now friends and had this time together. Before we go, any final words of encouragement to our listeners?
always know that God, the universe, whatever that label you like to use, label it, whatever that energy is that you put a name on it, always is there to support you. Because if you look back at your life, everything always worked out the way it was supposed to. It always worked out for the greater good, at least. And that's a lesson that I wish I knew sooner, is just be patient more. As I get older, I'm way more patient now to some degree. My wife may disagree on here and there, but trusting that process and knowing that there's always good coming to you. You just got to stay open to it. That's the only reason why sometimes we don't see it. We get caught in our fears, like I shared earlier, with going bankrupt and stuff like that. That causes that. But if we stay open and mindful to it, you'll see that there's always a blessing on the other side, that always for the greater good, and it's always there to support you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The Bible says in Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to them that love God. Those are called according to his purpose. And it's true, man. God makes everything good and in love, and he wants us to have a perfect, full life. And Satan's the manipulator, the liar, the deceiver who comes in and not only causes chaos, but then tries to blame it on God. So what Victor said, this has been fantastic. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, like our slogan says, don't just listen to this great content, but do it. Repeat it each day so you can have a great life, not just in this world, but more importantly, in eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This is our friend Victor, and we wish you only the best. Share this episode with your friends and family so they can benefit too. And Victor, I just wish you only good tidings. And if I can ever help you in any way, my friend, please don't hesitate to ask.
I appreciate it, brother. Thanks for having me on, and the feelings are mutual. So any way I can, just let me know.
Oh, absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, go start applying this and check out our next episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat for life.